Hey, everybody, it's Corey Poirier, and we're back again with the Blue Talks Amplify Your Message event. We took a bit of a break to air a pre-recorded interview with Evan Carmichael. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Evan is definitely a game changer on YouTube. I don't know many business channels on YouTube that have 350 million views. Evan is absolutely crushing it. So I hope you guys can take some nuggets you can take away from this guy and how he actually leverages the power of the celebrity and the influencer to grow his brand. One of the biggest key takeaways for me is he talked about how what he does, and he said this is a hack for people that want to know how to hack YouTube, is he looks for the names of videos that are really popular, and then he actually uses the same name, but he doesn't care about the content. The content is totally different. Uses the same name because he said what happens is then your video comes up as the next video after the really popular video. And I hadn't heard that before. So Evan knows his stuff. I mean, again, 300 and some million on a business channel, 2.5 million subscribers. So he knows his stuff. So he said that hack, I think it took him years to learn. So why not start doing it from day one? So we're back now. I have another special guest. I'm super excited. It's our last guest of the day. As we always say, last but not least, I'm super excited to help share the story about how he both wrote and launched this book, took it to amazing heights. And what I love about this story and what he's going to share is it's intentional. It wasn't one of those things where he wrote a book, everybody said, I need to have it. I mean, that did happen, but everybody said, I need to have it. And he just said, oh, that's kind of lucky. And that worked out really well. And then just walked away. I mean, there was an actual process involved in almost each step. So you guys are going to learn some amazing nuggets. If you want to get a book out there and get it into more hands, sell more copies, I really think you need to be here for this interview. If you're seeing us live, awesome. If you're seeing us on the replay, we love you guys too. So thank you for joining us either way. So without further ado, Kelly's back as my co-host. So everybody knows Kelly now. Without further ado, I want to introduce James Redfield, the author of, which I happen to have it with me here, the Celestine Prophecy. Kelly has it too. One of the best-selling books in the world for I think close to 2 years. James, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us today.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
It's so exciting to have you here. And so, James, I'm going to jump right in. I want to make some, magic happen for people. So let's jump right in. One of the things I wanted to ask you about before we dive into some of the ways you made or you brought this book to life from start to finish is the importance of the work being good and you being passionate about it. And the reason I bring this up is because you know that I love doing interviews. And I'm passionate about it. And so I want to ask you, how important is it if you want to put a good book out that you're passionate about the subject of the book?
Well, it's what activates karma, right? It's, giving, helping, have a truth to tell that helps people, helps the situation. Whatever it is, it's if you can wrap your heart and hands around an act of helping, then in my view, we do understand the karmic design of the world right now. It's been discovered, and it's all around helping. So if you want to be lucky, be a helper. And it's everything. Because the universe very synchronistically shines the spotlight on different contributions that pop up out there, and anybody who can really look at it, that phenomenon. Why is this random book suddenly flying off the shelves? It's the right helping move landing in the zeitgeist to make consciousness go up, and once you start to feel that out intuitively, in my view, you're on your way to finding and then making your contribution.
Wow. So one of the things that pops into my head is Steve Martin had this quote one time. And he said, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And I wanted to talk about this in relation to the book because one of the things that you did, and I think this is an important place to start, in addition to writing the book, in addition to everything that went into writing the book, and I'm sure we could circle back to that at the end, but as you were writing the book, you didn't just leave it to chance that people were going to enjoy this book or pass it along or turn the pages. Can you tell us a little bit about the process you followed to make sure the book was ready to reach the world?
Well, I took an extra year, really, once I thought the book was complete. Writing is a very solitary journey. And most all authors know that. You have to pound it out by yourself. You have to get up in the morning and do it. You have to energize yourself on something. And that's why inspiration, energy, is so important. But at some point, you think, hey, this is done. This is done. But I think, people who make a movie don't feel that way. It's the first cut, of the movie, And so what do? They test it. They get an audience. What did the audience like? What did they not like? And you can do that with a book. And maybe it's easier with a novel, but really, it's both. You can do nonfiction and test it. And the way I did it, and this is an important part, and that is to get people that aren't going to just say it's great because they're your friends, get friends of friends, people you meet at a party, people, randomly. And what happened, what I did is I just, made a bunch of copies. And whenever I found someone who agreed to do it because of the subject or whatever, I would just take that as a special event. It's a synchronicity, it's a moment in time where the universe is seeking to help you. And so I took it very seriously. I maybe circulated the book through 75, 80 people over the course of a year. And I asked them, after they said they finished, I would ask a series of questions. One is, did you really get to the end, or did you scan your way through it? And if the answer was, well, yeah, I didn't really finish it, where did you stop? So you got to know that. Where did they lose interest? And interestingly, across the 80 people, very, very early, I started finding common complaints about, well, this was too complicated. I didn't understand this part of it. And, we're busy, right? We got a lot of choices of entertainment. So they just put it down. So that's the first question I wanted answered was, where did they stop? And the other questions had to do with each chapter content. Did you skim when it at any point where it bogged down? Or did you lose interest and have to skip forward before you got your interest rekindled? So that was very important. And the other one is, and to me, it's the most important, is how did you feel about it after it was over, right? And that includes the question, would you refer it to someone? And what I did is, across all those questions, I took, these 80 people or so as a real synchronicity, like wherever they stopped, that could be a problem in the book. And so I went in and I looked at that passage, and I just, intuitively sort of simplified it or made it more clear. And until the next person didn't have that difficulty that I gave it to, right? So I went through all the difficulties in the book that way. And until what I got was, even before maybe I asked all these questions, I started to get, well, look, this was very interesting, and I just wondered if I could have another copy. I want to send it to my friend over in Spain, who, we'd love to talk about this kind of thing together, right? So again, whatever the theme of the book is, that's what you want to hear. You want to hear the pass along energy of it. When people start to say, hey, this is really good, I want to give it to, can I keep it? First of all, can I keep this? That's what you want to hear. And then you're looking for the pass along energy. And, but again, it was a lot of work, I mean, I say it was a lot of work, it was very inspiring, especially when I started hearing the pass along effect. And that's essentially what happened with the Celestine Prophecy. We didn't advertise it in in anywhere in another country, for instance. But even though we created our own, to get it out earlier, we created our own small company. It was in the first 6 months, it was in about 4 countries just because people passed it along to their friends there, So again, it was something I do. I'd never heard of anybody doing it before, but I just really think it's worth the time to really think about testing your books.
Well, and I think it's important to go backwards a step too and tell people when we're talking timeline wise here. And I'm not talking just when you did the test, because we're going to talk shortly about what you and Sally did with the book. But we're not talking like 2015. We're talking like 1990, 1991 when you guys were doing some of this stuff. This was
93 and 4 is when we did.
Yeah. So we're talking in a timeline when that wasn't as common. Like I'm going to talk about going to traditional bookstores in a second with you wasn't as common either. So when you say I hadn't heard of anybody else doing it, we were definitely in a different book world at that time.
That's true.
But everything you're going to say today, I think equally applies to somebody in the digital world. It's just them understanding how they translate that. So having said that, James, we have a question in the comments I want to pose to you. The question is, and maybe it circles back to what you just shared, but do you have any advice for a first-time book writer?
Just in general.
That is just a general question. Know
your beginning and know your ending. And when you start the book, don't, if you start the book and you get through one chapter and you're starting the second, you go, the first chapter didn't set the second up right. I'm going to make a change in the first chapter. Don't do it. Don't do it. Make a note back there to make the change on the second pass and keep going until it'll be terrible. In most cases, first drafts are terrible, right? But get to the ending before you start another pass. Because all these intuitions that you're getting, make notes about what you should have done earlier in the book. But don't go back and try to write that, because then you'll get circular. You're writing the first 2 chapters 10 times. Get it to the ending, because before you get to the ending, you don't know whether the ending's correct. It's because most books take on a life of their own as you write, and if it's a novel, that's absolutely true. Well, what happens is that you should let them do it. The characters will come to you to have a character do something, but you realize looking at your outline, or you'll say, well, wait a minute, there's no way that's going to ruin the whole plot structure if I let that character do this. But let them do it anyway. Let them do it anyway. Sometimes it won't work, but very often it's an organic swing in the book that increases interest, and because that character did it, then you have to shift the ongoing journey of the book. Now, again, it doesn't. That's there are no characters usually in nonfiction, but there are stories. There are elements, and those elements will shift during the second pass. So, I think that, it's the old thing where if you're an author, you're creating something, but as soon as you start the second pass of your book, then you're the reader, and you're asking yourself, wait a minute, that's not clear. You go through it. This is not clear. What was I thinking? And you on the second pass, you write that passage over or add to or take from. But I think it's really important to know you're in an organic process. So you're going to get intuitive hunches and corrections and new additions, and you'll have to throw a lot of it out. I think most novelists would agree that maybe the average writing of a novel takes about 6 or 7 passes. Certainly does with me.
So what I'm hearing, James, is you mean you didn't write the Celestine Prophecy on one run through with no edits?
Yeah, right. My channel to God was a little fuzzy. I have to get it a little bit at a time.
Well, but it is interesting how when people read a book that they look at as a monumental book that changed so many lives, how sometimes I think there is a belief, people think that the author just sat down, wrote it, went, and that nobody else could ever write a good book because they just weren't handed that.
That's the mysticism, right? And authors, they sometimes, create this kind of mysticism. I'm chosen, right? I was chosen. And there is a sense of that with any book, I think, that it's given to you. You're not really writing it. Mm-hmm. You're just it's given to you in a way that's transpersonal. And, there's nothing special about most writers, nothing special about me. I wasn't chosen to write that book. I just had the idea, and I was in the right moment in history. And I sweated blood until I got it done.
So the person that asked the question said, "Thank you, James. Appreciate your advice." Next person said, "Awesome advice." Next person said, "Inspiration plus perspiration." So awesome stuff. James, I want to go further down the path from the writing side a little bit to the marketing side, because we were talking earlier today. Somebody told me recently, "I'm done. I've written the book. I'm done." I said, "What do you mean you're done? You're just starting. Like you finished one part, but you're just at the starting line now, because you still have to get the book out to people." And Kelly, I'm going to circle back with questions you have right after this story I wanted to ask James about, but I wanted to flow into the story because I think it follows suit after the idea of getting the book to make sure it's written in a way that people are passing it along and moving it along. The next thing you did, James, is you guys, and I mean, I don't want to steal too much thunder from the story, but you guys loaded up the car and started visiting bricks and mortar bookstores. Can you tell us a little bit about what that involved, like how many bookstores you went to, what you did when you got there, and how you helped make the book a pass-along book?
Well, we stopped at every big city from Atlanta to Sacramento, and then back through the northern route all the way to Boston, and down the East Coast all the way to Miami. Pretty much worn out a little Camaro we had, but I knew that I had a pass along book, and so I just figured, why not seed it in as many places as I could? And what that meant was we just visited these small bookshops, and back then, there were lots of mom and pop bookstores. There were little independent bookstores. A lot of them were, self-growth, psychological, self-understanding. It was the time when baby boomers were moving past 38 as in mass, just like millennials are now, by the way. But what happens was that people were searching a little bit. They're tuning in much more to the nature of life and philosophy and spirituality, and so there are all these little bookstores that specialized in that. The New Age bookstores. They kind of call themselves, but they were more than that. But so we just, every city that we stopped in had 4 or 5 little mom and pop. Some of them were very big, but they were independent bookstores. How we ever let the chains put them out of business is beyond me, but that did happen, of course. But so we stopped, and we had a certain philosophy that you know about, which is because the book was about the experiences of higher consciousness, spiritual tune in, and you, of course, and it was about synchronicity, which is the experience of meaningful coincidences that give us, that take us down a journey of destiny if we can step into it, right? So that's what the Celestine Prophecy is about. So we figured when we stopped into a bookstore, we had a great distributor. That's a story in itself. but we wound up with a great distributor. So when we walked in these bookstores, they were familiar with our distributor. So all we had to do was give a copy to the owner or whoever was the bookworm in the store that came up with new books, and was on the lookout for new books. Give them a bookstore, and we figured, because of the synchronicity aspect, that whoever happened to be in the bookstore when we walked in was there to get a copy of the Celestine Prophecy. So they got a free copy. We, as you know, we gave away almost 2,000 copies in 6 months. So what happened by the time we got through that tour, our little company was taken off. We're finally able to have as many sales as we had money to pay for ordering new books. It's about a 3-month turnaround. And it was fun because we were borrowing money from everybody. So, just trying the cash flow issue, right, is one for small publishers. But once we got past that, then the story took off from there again. But that was the strategy.
So, James, a couple of things to unpack there, because somebody just asked me about this the other day. They said, well, I'm selling quite a few books right now. Why should I bother going to a publisher? But they're in the online world, but they're not really in Barnes and Noble in the stores. And I said, well, how are you going to fund this thing if it blows up huge? And they're like, oh, well, that's no problem. It's all print on demand these days. But my question is, why would somebody, or why did you even explore the idea of going with a publisher now that the book was taking off and doing all the things it was doing at that time?
Well, it was going international. And, it's one thing to create a company that can handle everything domestically. But when you're talking about all the legal apparatus that's different in all these other countries, then you have to, at that time at least, I really felt like we had to make a deal with a larger New York publisher, because by then, we were getting calls about the book. It was like, sorry, we didn't return your call earlier, Mr. Redfield, but we sure would like to take over and publish your book. And again, through a kind of synchronistic process, we chose one and let them do the publishing worldwide.
Wow. Well, and I hope people take one other thing away from this part of your story too, James. Is what you were saying. We were borrowing money from everybody. We were leveraging money everywhere we could. Again, I think with something like this, because when Celestine hit, it just started picking up steam. A lot of people probably thought James Redfield, overnight success. No pains along the way, no obstacles. And like you said, they didn't see on the backside that you were just trying to figure out how do we finance this to make sure we don't miss out on the momentum.
Well, it's a winner can, there'll be a lot of people in a winner. It's that in between place, where you're just getting momentum building, and you need people to invest. You have to be very careful. The first investor we took in as a small company, and it's one of these hit the brick wall kind of moments, because we were engaged in printing books and getting everything going, and as an investor, he just completely pulled out, and so we had to, that was a whammy, because you just think, okay, well, is this not supposed to be? Is this a big ego trip on my part, or what's going on? And you have all those self doubts. But the fact is, we got another investor to get us over the hump, and that investor actually, a year or so later, was under indictment. So it was a good thing that he pulled out, right? Because it wouldn't have worked out, I don't think, with that kind of karma going on.
Wow. Well, I mean, it kind of dials into what the book's about anyway, synchronicity, right? It's probably when you're sitting there with all those books and an investor pulls out, it's probably a little harder to go, it's just synchronicity.
Well, but it's the key to keep the synchronicity moving. You have to find a silver lining in every event. And look at us now. We're all half, shut down. The economy is running at slow speed. A lot of people lost everything, everything. And you talk about having to rely on spiritual connection, momentum, good karma, all the experiences that we know about now, thankfully, about the higher experiences of spiritual connection. And people are, we call it consciousness, consciousness is rising, and it absolutely is, merely because of the surge in people meditating. And it's a kind of prayer meditation. And so whenever there's a setback like this, I mean, this is a world setback orchestrated by, we won't talk about, and didn't have to happen. It happened purely for political reasons. And that's okay, it happened. We're still stuck in the same place, right? And what happens is that I believe we are thrown back on ourselves and our own consciousness, and we could preoccupy ourselves with a lot of fun and stuff and never tune in spiritually at all. But this is a reset. So, the silver lining on all that, and, including our personal setbacks, is, hey, there's a spiritual approach to life that you can tune into that is understood. And it's just a matter of applying what I believe is already understood in the world to your own journey. And again, you fix your karma, you start to get luckier, and that's the name of the game right now, especially.
Well, and James, I knew somebody would notice that somebody said there's a business plan in the back end. So important to know that. So that's what I wanted people to get from this too, is that this wasn't all just lucky coincidence. Somebody else noted it was the very first book on their journey. I'm sure you've heard that many times. She said, my sister-in-law told me the book reminded her of herself, so she had to buy it to find out about herself. So the book reminded her sister about her, so she had to get the book to find out who she was, I guess. And yes, setbacks are just resets. One of the things I wanted to mention, though, James, and you've shared this, I know, with me before, but you shared it in interviews publicly as well, as far as one of the things I like that you say is people, I think, sometimes think I have to create something from scratch that nobody else has ever done to have success. And I know, a lot of people think everything in the Celestine you created from scratch, but you've been very vocal about the fact that you had other people you studied under and learned from, people from afar that you maybe never met that you studied. So it is possible still for us to gather the foundations of what works and share that message with other people without having to create something brand new on our own. Is that correct?
Absolutely, because it's a synthesis. We all synthesize all this information we've learned, but it puts it in a clear capsule for us. And if you offer that, very often other people will be, that's a clear version of the law of attraction, right? That's what the karma involved. Oh no. But it's all out there so much now, and it's all easy. It's easier to do than ever before. You're the speaking wizard. Everybody comes from nowhere, right? I was the shyest person in the world. And then I had to speak one time with Deepak to 16,000 people, right? So we step up, and nobody's born with success. Even if they have the money of it, they're not born with the ability to actualize it, right? So it's we all have to learn self-confidence. Because, the biggest question, and you get that all the time, I'm sure, is, how do I get sure of myself? How do I get a message that I can boldly present to the world, right? Well, at some point, you got to learn to speak. You got to speak it. You got to, and, everybody wants a book. You got a message? Where's your book? So now all of a sudden, and the world is shifting and changing so quickly. There's room for everybody to be super creative. I call it inspiration energy, right? But it's our natural birthright that step into, but it's a kind of opening up of intuitive intelligence. I didn't read anything about how I strategized the Celestine Prophecy. Nothing. There was nothing. But I intuited it, and everybody has their own guidance. That it's their opening to intuitive intelligence. But you got to be a giver. You got to be a giver. And make that your motivation, and don't send anything out there that corrupts society, right? You might make a hit, but there's a lot of stuff that'll come back on it. You may get the pink Cadillac, as I say, but it's going to break down at the worst time.
Well, and James, I want to let Kelly jump in here, but I just have to add, when you said, I love what you said there about you may have the money, but it doesn't mean you know how to actualize the success. And it makes me think of a great quote by Zig Ziglar. He had so many of them, but he said, you can't hire somebody else to do your push-ups for you.
That's right.
And it's the same thing, right? You can't get in shape by hiring somebody else and saying, hey, get down and do my push-ups. Much the same way, you might have the money, but it doesn't mean you learned how to create it or how to sustain it, or more important than that, how to be truly wealthy. Because as we've learned, probably long ago, it's not the money that makes a person wealthy overall. So I love that you said that as far as, success, it doesn't mean just because you have the money that you understand what it means to be successful or create significance in people's lives. So I just wanted to add that in. And Kelly, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in. I'm sure you've been stewing, waiting for some questions. I'm seeing some comments here. One, I want to mention, James, somebody said, thank you for opening the door to so many. And the power of, thanks, great conversation on the power of opening up our intuition and using them for good and service to others. And such a believer of what we put out comes back. So just wanted to share some of the comments coming in. But Kelly, I'll let you jump in.
That's excellent. So James, I just, like, one of the things that I really loved about your book is that it really made me trust my intuition more so than ever before. And I think that was one of the reasons that I love the story of it, because so many times people will just tell you, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that. And it doesn't always click in. But when you tell a story about it and it feels like it's more real life, then the lesson seems to kick in better. And I think that was the thing that I enjoyed the most about your book, is that every time, there was some sort of coincidence that happened, it would be like, oh yeah, that kind of happened to me. Like, or sometimes if someone wants to hire me as a coach and then they decide not to, I'm like, it's okay, because something else is going to come. Right. And, even with the whole COVID thing, I'm like Corey, I do a lot of speaking. And it was really interesting because I remember in the fall, I had like 13 speaking gigs in 2 months. And then I was thinking about how come in January to June, I have none. Like I had like 4. And then it was like, all of a sudden then COVID hit. And it was like, oh, I wonder if the universe already knew this was going to happen. And that's why I didn't get all these speaking gigs. And, it would just seem like it was just all working in my favor. And then I pivoted into coaching people for, becoming best-selling authors. And so I thought maybe this was like already planned,
Well, and James, I'll add in too, Kelly is a pro at seeing the silver lining. One of the things that I didn't mention off the top, but Kelly is a burn victim from the age of 2. And so she, had to go through her whole life seeing the silver lining. And she has a great talk called Ugly is Still Beautiful. And it's a talk about how she discovered that she's still beautiful. But yeah, so Kelly, I mean, you've had, like we talked about silver linings, you've had your whole life, trying early on, especially as a young child, to see the silver linings and things. And so I think it's made you a pro at it.
Yeah. And I think even, becoming a speaker, well, back when I was 14 and I was in 4-H, we had to do a public speaking competition and I won. And so, I believe that I didn't become a speaker till I was 44, but all along the way, my life was being shown that I should be a speaker, but I didn't see it as something that I could do.
Right.
So
we discover ourselves, right? It's self-discovery. There's so much more in all of us, really. If we let ourselves be guided, and if we are trying to be upbeat, inspiration is the measure, right? And inspiration comes from within, and then it creates. And so it's it's an interesting world once we tune into the spiritual side of it, and
It really is.
it just boosts creativity, and and it's everything improves when you become a giver.
Right.
Well,
And you know what? Your book is actually the only book that I've been able to read like 3 times, like from cover to cover. So, and again, I think it's because it really helped me to open up my whole spiritual side and understand that everything has a reason for happening. Even me getting burnt as a 2-year-old, there was a reason that it happened, right?
That's
So,
right.
Well, and the other thing too is part of that whole thing about James, you sending it out to those 80 people. That's part of probably why, Kelly, you were able to read it 3 times, because you tested the book to make sure it was one of those books where people couldn't put it down. And I think I still go back to that, and I think that was such an intentional part of why the book became a pass along book.
Yeah. And again, that was intuitive. I didn't read about it, but I just decided to do it. And I think it paid off. And again, we have that intelligence within us. And if you try to do everything with just the ego, or even think that you have to think of everything, the key is to let ourselves be guided, and begin, as you said, begin to look at at these hunches and urges and follow up, call that old friend, see what happens.
So, James, I'm also curious, you have a bookshelf behind you. So I have to ask as well, are you, because I find some authors, after they've been writing for a while, they don't read as much as they once did. And so I'm curious, are you still an avid reader? Do you still read on a regular basis? And I want to talk before we let you go about anything new you have coming up, but are you still an avid reader?
Yeah, I do read. I read a lot of political commentary right now, because that's, and when I say politics, I mean the streams of power balancing that control the world. And so a little bit about what the next book is about next year, is trying to transcend the political landscapes, because there's a lot of manipulation coming from everywhere to what we think and what we believe, and it's really so bad now that you can't even get a feeling that you're hearing the truth at all, which means you have to dig deeper and deeper for the truth of really what's happening in our world right now. So yeah, I'm reading a lot of that kind of commentary.
Well, and I never like to bring something out unless a person's ready to share it yet, but you said the book next year. So are you able to say that you're working on a new book then?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I said that a lot because it's been a while. And, but it's with me, it's all about the gestalt of the world and what humanity is opening up to and discovering. What's the current revelation of this decade? And so it's been a mess for a while. And but I think there's a spirituality that's not particularly religious, but it encompasses the religions. But it's a spiritual consciousness that's evolving that have been predicted, from many areas, including myself, that it one day will happen. So there's a catalyst, I believe, out there right now that is reason to be. It makes us I think more optimistic, in spite of all of the power tripping that's going on. We're breaking through to some genuine spiritual discoveries that are crystallizing around the world. Right now, I just call it it's a new time in the world, and primarily it's because of where the generations are. There's a moment, really, just a few years in every generation when they ask the higher questions. And it happens at different ages. And it just happens that boomers are at the legacy stage. What can I do to help my grandchildren? What can I do to help this world? Millennials, 38 to 42, they're thinking, okay, I have income, I have kids, I have a relationship. Is this all there is? Now, when a whole generation, a huge generation like millennials are thinking, is this all there is? What you get is the answer to that. And no, there's spiritual consciousness and advanced creativity beyond belief that can happen with a generation that is reaching this age. And then you have the children of millennials, the older children of millennials who are facing college, and college is a mess. I mean, it's a complete mess, especially for young men. Young men have decided en masse to skip college. And that's going to change everything, and for the better, maybe. And I think that it's just a new time in the world to tune into your best spiritual potential and your breakthrough to highest creativity. So that's what the book will be about, and to transcend the political ego trips that seek to enslave us, But it's an important time.
Well, and I won't reveal it ever. My lips are sealed. But you told me one part of the book that it's still with me to this minute. Like, it was so powerful. Just one part of the book you told me that I'm like, wow, I can't wait till this book is out. So I think people are going to be blown away. And yeah, I'm regardless, like you say, of how long it's been, the world is ready. And as you know, timing is everything. So. I wanted to talk about this for just 1 second too, James, before.
Well, let me just add before you do that, the other thing that I'm spending time on is an internet community, the Celestine community. And I want everybody who's, if you love these books, if you love to talk about synchronicity and breaking through to your best creativity and being intuitively guided, and that's what we're doing on the Celestine community. It's on the Celestine Vision site. But I also want to recommend to everyone, we're locked down. And sure, it's hard to get with friends. But for a while longer, we're going to have to do that virtually. So, again, communities are popping up everywhere. Find one for yourself because it's very, very important to get back that sense of meeting somebody new and seeing some synchronicity around that. That's a big message that I'd like to convey. This is the time to get out, even though we can't get out so much. But find new connections with people. Let some synchronicity happen.
Love that. And I've signed up already for the community. So I wasn't sure. I was going to ask you about new things coming up to see if we could tell people about the community, because I'm really excited. I know you've been working toward that for a long time. And whenever the only other thing I was going to ask you about the intuition, and more just share this. You talked about intuition and how, like I said, timing is everything. This book, you may have taken a break, but the world wasn't ready. But what I love that you did, James, and you shared this, I think, in an interview from a while back with us, is even when you went from the Celestine to the 10th Insight, I mean, obviously, you had a monumental book. I'm sure the publisher was nipping at your heels saying, we need a new book right away. But I know that you worked those books. You worked with them when they were ready to be in the world, and the world was ready for them. Am I wrong in saying that? I believe the books came out when you felt the world was ready for the message.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm unable to write about anything else, right? And there's not a new revelation happening that's significant. It's like after the first book, as you said, the publishers, reps came to me and saying, look, you have to feed the monster, they said. You got to get another book out within a year. And I said, well, I just talked about 9 insights. I'm there's going to be a 10th, but I haven't seen it yet. So how can I write a book? But lo and behold, the 10th insight, of course, was a revelation of when we really took the afterlife seriously, right? Yeah, we come from someplace, we live, and lo and behold, we are mortal, and we go back, right, to that place. So it was a way for people the revelation was people could lose the fear of thinking about their own mortality, because they could think of the afterlife from which they come, to which they go back, as a real culture. This is a real spiritual dynamic culture, and that's what all the near-death experience testimony affirmed. And it was a real revelation, that happened in the late 90s.
Wow, yeah, I love that. One of the big things to me is so important, and I love that you practice what you preach. I mean, you set intentions. I know that we talked about that in the past. You believe, in karma, and you try to serve on the right side of karma, and you believe in synchronicities, like all the things that are in your book. It isn't just something you I'll just put this out in the world and hope they buy it, but I don't. Like, you actually practice this stuff, and I think that's crucial. And it's interesting because somebody mentioned here in the comments, raising the vibration, love it. Aloha, absolutely. Indigenous prophecies about these times are unfolding. We are in a spiritual crisis and transformation, but I see the light at the end of this pandemic era. So what you're saying, James, is resonating. Another one said, how do we join? Okay, this is great, because she gave me the segue to what my final question was going to be. But James, so I just wanted to say that I love that you practice what you preach. Not everybody can say that. So I just want to share that. That's an important aspect. When you're writing this stuff, I can confirm that you're actually doing this stuff too.
Well, authenticity is the new call word. I mean, really, it's the new the new direction, and it's easy to let your ego go for fun, or go for excitement, or go for recognition. But it has to be authentic. Our best creativity has to be authentic, and that's if there's a new revelation happening right now, that's it.
So, Kelly, is there anything you want to ask James before I ask him the final question that somebody posed, but I was going to ask, so it's going to be my closing question?
Well, and you already asked too. I was going to ask what's next, and so we know that there's a new book coming out. So, what are 2 tips that you would love to give somebody that wants to start being a writer?
First of all, become an energetic giver. Right, okay. Because it's the inspiration energy that takes you over, right, and opens doors. But if you're a giver of energy, what comes out is you're then a sharing of your life with another person. So you're offering intuitively. Anytime we meet somebody new, for instance, what happens is that we get around to sharing experiences, right? That's what humans do. So to do that consciously, means that you have to kind of look at the inspiration and look for inspiration in the other person. Now, what that does is, that intent comes right up through your heart and to the other person, and you start looking for inspiration energy. Pretty soon, you're talking 90 miles an hour, and you're inspired yourself, right? So you want to come back from this shutdown. You want to find your synchronistic flow. It begins with giving, because when you share something, what will happen is that the world is designed for us to be sharing synchronistic experiences, right? Providing for each other. So when you think of something, well, for some reason I'm thinking of this thing that knocked me down, and here's the way I got over it. And you be bold and you say, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but here's how I handle this problem for myself. And what you hear is, this is what I needed to hear. The other person will say, I needed to hear that right now in my life. Thank you so much. You've provided a synchronicity for somebody. So the world is in reality designed for this. Now, humans have, we've got to be conscious enough to enter that part of the spiritual world where you're following your intuition. So what would be the greatest thing? Give energy. We have to find that if you look for the inspiration on the other person's face, it comes into you first as it flows out of you and into them. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, allow yourself to be guided, because we all have intuitive hunches. Call that old friend, call that client. Go to search something on the internet that pops into your mind suddenly. that I've been wanting to research that. I think I'll do it right now because I got the hit to, right? We don't, people, we're being taught out there that the world's dead and materialistic and there's nothing happens by chance and there's no spiritual reality. The dark side just kind of wants that to be what you believe. And everything they create is to make you believe that. But you can prove to yourself, though, if you follow your hunches, you act on them, then act logically on them, right? Don't sell out and move to California because you had a dream. Let the synchronicities compound a little bit, taking you there. But let yourself be guided.
I love you that you shared that, especially with your comment before. I'll never forget, there was this one girl that reached out to me because she's a burn survivor. So she contacted me on Facebook and she said, Cal, I'm a burn survivor too. And, if you're ever coming to Denver, can you let me know? Because I'd love to come hear you speak. And I said, well, actually, I'm coming to Denver tomorrow. And she's like, oh my gosh. I said, yeah, I'm actually coming to Denver. I'm speaking at this event. And you want me to see if I can get you some tickets? And sure enough, her and her mom came. And then we had this beautiful moment because she just thought that was not going to happen, that I was actually going to be in her city, when she most needed me to help her, right? And so, yeah, I totally believe in that. And I even remember the day I started painting was the same type of thing. My best friend wanted to get me painting, and I'm like, I'm not a painter. I've never painted in my life. And the next day I saw a painting on Facebook, and then I said, oh my God, how am I going to learn how to do that? So anyways, I started watching some YouTube videos, and I went and I had a nap, and I said to my heart, what does my heart say? And it said, go paint. And I was like, nah, what does my heart say? And then I heard this voice yelling at me, get up and go paint. And so I had already won a paint kit the year before that. And then now I'm painting, and there's a whole other story that goes along with it. But, you're so right about how we need to listen to our heart. And when we get those intuitive hits, we need to act on them. And so many people just ignore them. And I call them, those are whispers of our heart, that our soul is trying to speak to us. And most times we ignore it. So that's why I also love your book so much, is because it really helped me to trust that we're supposed to listen to those whispers of our heart.
If you seek the intuitive guidance to be a synchronicity for another person, more people will come into your life acting the same exact way. So in that way, once you get into that, once you realize that that's the design of the universe, we're supposed to be helped. It's not supposed to be this hard. What happens is, if more and more, I call it people of the light, will be practicing that way. The dark is getting darker, that's for sure. But it's also getting more remote from those of us on the light side. And it's just time to choose, which side you want to play on.
It is. It's so beautiful when synchronicity happens that way. I love it. Yeah.
So, James Redfield, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. The question that I said I had to ask you in closing is, of course, how we can learn more from and about you, but also how we can learn about the Celestine community. And I said the question somebody asked, they said, hola, James, from Hawaii. Mahalo for your vision and important work. How do we join the Celestine community? So that was going to be my question, so she asked it for me.
Well, go on CelestineVision.com or Google me, and the website will come up. And on the website is a description of the community and how to enter. And we're building the critical mass. If you remember from the first book, it's something we're doing very consciously on the community.
Wow. Well, I love it, James. As you know, I'm a massive supporter, and so I'll keep waving the flag for all the great things you're doing. And so I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to spend with us today.
Well, thank you. I always enjoy it, Corey.
Yeah.
You're an energy builder. You gather people around and have fun, and you teach creativity just with your personality. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, James. We'll let you run. I'm just going to say our buys with Kelly, and then we'll let everybody else run. So thank you, James. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, James.
We'll let you
Kelly.
and enjoy the rest of your day. Awesome. So amazing stuff. Kelly, hopefully that both energized you and gave you a lot of room for thought, and at the same time gave a lot of nuggets around how to launch a book. Because I think when you think of Celestine and James's work, most people think of the intuition side, think of synchronicity, think of karma, think of all these things. But you don't probably think of what's behind the book. How did it get launched? Was it a coincidence? Was it actually their work behind it? And a few people said here in the comments, I love to hear that there was actually a business plan or a strategy behind it. And as you heard, Kelly, I mean, there was strategy. Like, this was all not maybe planned, but they actually took an intentional approach to make sure this book reached a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that there was a long game, right? It's not just a short game that he's in for the long game. And then that's what most people need to realize. So many people, come to me and they say, okay, I want to be a speaker and I want to be an author and I want to be a best-selling author. And how can you teach me how to be a best-selling author? And I'm like, sure. Do you have your book written? No. Do you know what you want to write? No. And I'm like, well, I can't even think about teaching you how to be a best-selling author until you have the book, right? Like, there's a whole process to it. There's a whole, a long process to it. And you have to be willing to do the work. And, I have people come to me about being a speaker, and the same thing. They're like, okay, I got my one sheet. I got my topics. How come I don't have any speaking gigs? And I'm like, well, you've got to do the work. And so I loved what James was talking about. Like, the synchronicities are awesome, but you still have to put the plans in place to make all those synchronicities happen.
Yeah, it goes back to what I talk about, the law of action. I talk often about how, and James mentioned the law of attraction, and he said, sometimes we make it new again. And I think he was referring to The Secret. I'm going to assume, because he didn't say, but probably referring to The Secret. And when it came out, and Kelly, I'm a proponent, love The Secret, but also at the same time feel the one thing that was missing was the action component. Because I know a lot of people told me, they thought, well, I wished upon the star to have the motorbike downstairs when I got up this morning, and it wasn't there. I started wishing yesterday at like 3 o'clock. I've already put in almost 24 hours into manifesting. Where's my motorbike? And I think it was because in the movie and stuff, there was like a genie with a lamp. And so that, some people, especially if you're a person that wanted it to be a quick fix type thing, you thought, where's my motorbike? But again, what action did you take? And I shared this yesterday, but I'll share it again. Lisa Nichols, that to me summed it up better than most. I asked her, what do you think, what did you think of The Secret, and was it missing anything? And she said, I'll put it to you this way, and I told this yesterday, but if you have the greatest vision board ever created in the world beside you, and you're sitting on a couch and you watch TV, and you only look at the vision board between, but you look at it all year, at the end of the year, if you don't get up off the couch, you're just going to have a lump in the couch. And to me, that sums it up to your point, Kelly, is that if you haven't written the book yet, if you don't even want to write a book, or if you haven't decided to write a book, but then you go to Kelly and say, can you teach me how to make this book a bestseller that I haven't written yet? You need to do some of the work.
Exactly.
It goes back to, you can't hire somebody to do your push-ups for you. You need to do some of the push-ups.
Exactly. You do have to do some work. You can't just like magically have a book appear, and you just can't magically have, 20 million copies sold of your book. Like he shared with us what he did, right? Going bookstore to bookstore. And it's interesting because Wayne Dyer has a very similar story where he had a station wagon and he packed up his wife and his kids and like 2,000 books and went across the country, bookstore to bookstore, doing talks and selling books. And so it's so cool to see that, there is a whole grassroots process to becoming an author, becoming a speaker, becoming a podcaster, and ultimately amplifying your message.
Well, yeah, and as we sort of bring things to a close, I'll tell people how they can learn more about this and what to expect tomorrow. But to your point, Kelly, I want to share one quick story that I think also summarizes what you just said with another author who did similar, which is Robin Sharma. So those who may be familiar with The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, another one of the better selling books of all time, especially in the self-help world. And Robin Sharma told me the story that what he did with The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari is he was a lawyer, prestigious law firm, making a really good income, and he decided that wasn't his calling. So he threw in the towel on this law career that he spent these years building, and him and his father went to Kinko's and started with 500 copies in the back of Robin's car, and Rob went around and did Rotary and Toastmaster talks. and they sold the books to the back of the car. And there's a powerful message within the story. But what happened, how Robin got discovered, is he went and did a book signing at a Chapters in Ontario, in Toronto, I think downtown. And he was there for, I think, 2 hours, and only 3 people showed up. Now, if Robin was to go to a book signing at most Chapters now in Canada, but probably in the US, but in Canada for sure, he'd probably have 500 people lined up or more. And but he had 3 people. And so what would most people do? Most people would say, this is useless, and fold up the table and leave early. Robin stayed for the whole thing. He didn't know this at the time, but one of the 3 people that chatted with him for like a half hour, he got a call the next week from the person's assistant and said he wants to meet with you at the office. And he said, oh, who is he? He didn't give me his card or anything. And she said his name. I forget what it was, but he's the publisher at HarperCollins.
Oh, no way.
He's interested in The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
If he would have left, he never would have got to meet him.
And then the book, the last cover, I have it over here on my wall. The last cover I have, I think, it's either 5 or 7 million copies now sold. And so you question, if he would have left, maybe that was his synchronicity. Maybe that was his one moment. And so, again, to your point, Kelly, we're just hearing 3 masters of the author world, James, Wayne, and Robin. And all 3 of them were willing to get in their car and basically finance it. You know, like James just said, financing, borrowing money, everything. Robin, I'm sure, did the same. I mean, he was a lawyer, but it meant how much money was he giving up to do that? So to your point, there is a grassroots movement. There is strategies that can work. But I think at some point you have to have a little faith, and you have to say, well, I'm willing to make a sacrifice to get this message to the world.
Exactly.
And thankfully, they all did, because those 3 books, even myself personally, or I should say those 3 authors, Wayne Dyer, I could at least cite 2 or 3 of his books that have had a profound impact on my life. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari had a profound impact on my life, and all of James's books have as well. So, you know, I'm glad those 3 authors are willing to do what they did.
Exactly. You know, and we are that next generation of authors that, you know, hopefully will be up there too, where we're selling 10 and 20 million copies of our books, right?
Well, I'll say this, never say it can't happen, because stranger things have always happened. So awesome. So hopefully we've done 2 days of author. I know, Kelly, I believe you're back with me tomorrow for the speaker day.
Yeah.
Okay. We've done 2 days of author as far as the Amplify Your Message event. We did the 2 author days. And hopefully you guys have gotten some golden nuggets. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground in 2 days, everything from audiobooks to how to be intentional about your book. Now we just talked about the importance of having a focus group to look at your book. We also talked right back from the first interview with Kevin Harrington about how to sell bulk copies of books, the importance of joint venture partnerships. And Kelly, I know both you and I have done those in the past and understand the value of those. And so I'm hoping within a matter of a couple of days, people have gotten some golden nuggets about how to either write and or release their book and then also market it. You don't have to take a lot. And in fact, it's probably better that you take 2 or 3 big nuggets you can take away than 150 that you won't do. So I'm so pumped about the fact that we've had 2 amazing days with amazing authors, amazing speakers and presenters. And so tomorrow, what you can expect is I'll say more of the same, but different variety. So now we're going to be focused on speaking. We have the day being kicked off by Laurie A. McNeil, who's a Blue Talks author and going to be a Blue Talks speaker soon. We have Benji Bruce, who I think you're familiar with, Kelly.
Yep.
Benji's the real deal. I mean, he's paid high value as a speaker, but also teaches people how to get their worth as a speaker. And so he does actually teach and coach other speakers. Anthony Trucks, who's been a fan favorite every time we've had him on. Anthony's the former American Ninja Warrior. Sorry, I'll correct that. Former NFL linebacker, 3-time American Ninja Warrior. And Anthony has this really cool story. I don't think we went into it much last time about how he shares this powerful story. And he has something happening from the sound. I'm not going to say what it is. That made it. It gave me chills. And I don't know if you remember me sharing the story with you, Kelly, but gave me chills that he does during his talk. And it was one of the biggest needle-dropping moments I've ever seen in front of an audience. He delivered his talk at Brendan Burchard's High Performance Academy. And I don't want to share it now, so I'm trying not to say it, but I'm dancing around it. But basically, the way he shares the start of his story is one of the best starts I've seen to any talk I've ever seen. So Anthony Trucks, I want to dive into that story and the psychology behind it. We have Jeff Hazlett. Jeff is, all kinds of cool, and he's going to be actually delivering a presentation. He's had a really cool background in broadcasting, speaking, speaks at the highest levels. And we have Jesse Ecker, if that last name sounds familiar, not to take away from his own powerful thunder, but Jesse Ecker runs T. Harv Eker International. So if I say that name, you probably have heard of his father as well, T. Harv Eker. So Jesse's going to be on with us tomorrow talking about how to crush it from stages and amplify your message on stages. And then we have tomorrow being finished with the pit bull of personal development, Larry Wingett, who will pull no punches, who will, during his interview, probably make me uncomfortable because he'll pull no punches, but he'll also make you think. He'll make you question the way you do things and question if you should be making changes in your life. So pretty powerful and big lineup tomorrow, and this just keeps on rolling along. As I mentioned yesterday, if you want to learn more about all the other things Blue Talks, easiest place is bluetalks.com. On there, you can find the link to our YouTube channel. You can find the link to our podcast, the book series, and there's a lot of other goodies on that website as well. That's it for me, Kelly. Anything else you want to add before we let everybody run?
No, it's just a very powerful day today, and I can tell tomorrow is going to be just as powerful, if not more powerful, and I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, there's tons of golden nuggets, and what better way to be able to have access to some of these very high-level people than by being part of the Blue Talks. So that's incredible too.
Well, and I just when you said that, Kelly, I thought I at least should add, I feel like sometimes people don't realize that, and I didn't when I started in this journey, realize what some of these speakers need to charge for a talk because of the demand on their time. And we're getting access to them for around the same amount of time they would deliver their talk for. And you get to ask questions in real time. And honestly, I think sometimes we forget how lucky we are to have that happen. And the truth is right now with COVID, we're able to actually bring on some of these speakers that otherwise we might not be able to because they would be somewhere speaking in the world and not able to make this happen. So I think we should all enjoy this precious time with some of these leaders because we may not get it again. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. With COVID, these people do have more time to be able to share with us, which is awesome because you're right. Most of them are traveling 200-300 days a year. Even yourself. I know, Corey, you travel quite a bit like that too. So, it's nice. James Redfield has always been one of my favorite authors. And so, I'm so honored that I actually got to ask him some questions. So thank you for including me. This is awesome.
100%, my friend. You were a great co-host. So thank you so much for helping make it possible. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me again tomorrow. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for Blue Talks. I'm Corey Poirier. Blue Talks represent. And I enjoy and appreciate you all. And I'll see you all here, same time, same bat channel tomorrow.
Sounds great. Bye.